make a video on a dream that I just had on um I was actually had several dreams. I'm going to discuss only one of them. Last night. One of the dreams I had last night, I was at a place that is some hybrid between a shopping mall and one of those IKEA stores. So it's not really a store, but more like a place that is most like a store or a shopping mall. Is a metaphorical um, uh, cutaway. So I have some printouts and some tools, some images of tools with their descriptions. Um, some of these images are, resemble, for example, you see this image of a disk and the name of the software. You also see a bunch of images of various objects found on Earth, from nature to there's a few buildings here, and there's a few items, a few images here that are clearly made from computer-based graphics. So there is a lot of various different images. As you can see, there is most of these images resemble tools of chemistry. Are often found in a chemistry lab or laboratory. But the idea is when you're making a choice between various, dare I say, lessons. Yeah. So it's a dream has a lot of different symbolism that is best. You're best off discussing this with a specialist, a psychic, a specialist, someone you trust. That is, this is not the realm of science. So, when you make a choice, to pick a life selection, remember this is your choice. And not just that, you have a lot of options. Now, oftentimes, tools can be made out of whims. So, advertising is not like, for example, last time I was at Fry's Electronics. That was about 10 years. It's about 10 years ago. I last visited it, and they had software sold, but not just that. They had a bunch of other tools sold, but they also sold a bunch of. They also had like a small restaurant in the middle, and they also sold a bunch of appliances. Shopping mall is very similar in terms of you have a bunch of stores on everything. That's the same thing with life selection, the afterlife. You get a glimpse of a little bit of everything before you make your final decision. And why, I was actually trying to look for the right book, and I just couldn't really find it. So, but I looked at population graphs, and obviously, the Earth's population is biggest in the last 200 years of history, where the population went from 800 million to what now is 6 to 7 billion to 8 billion, right? It's not huge. That means that a lot of souls migrate to the last 200 years prior to World War III and the conclusion of World War III, right? So that means that the vast majority of souls that's ever lived in this planet, in this timeline, will live in a time period where these tools are used, and not just that software and these things are not unfamiliar, right? And of course, buildings look very, modern. So, and then briefly here, that when one makes a choice in life, the choice is there. Regardless of whatever world records get broken, basically, some people have. You can have you could randomly pick two souls that's lived on Earth in the last 200 years, and then pick two random souls, and their lives could be completely different from each other. Many ways. Let's see. To end this video here, I saw the dream I had. You could see in the afterlife. You don't have material objects in terms of purchasing an item for yourself, right? You don't have. It's not like that. But you can do something similar to shopping, because when you make a life selection, for example, let's say there's a store that has mostly items that are useful to know for being a scientist or someone in academia, and that means you would be born in a middle class family or upper class family that will give you preparation to be a scientist, or a person that is goes to graduate school, or for example, or you'd be one of those scientists in the 1800s that discovered a bunch of stuff, or you could be let's see, if another store had items that for example look very ordinary, you would probably end up being a farmer, which is basically the vast majority of the population prior to 1800. Or another store could have mostly objects that are seen in movie props, which indicate that you could be a creative. Which there's plenty of jobs in the modern times for that. From last 200 years, there's been jobs for animator, children's book author. I'm not gonna list all of them. It's too many. Uh, a game programmer, artist for one of those listed professions I said. Let's see, another store could have mostly clothes, which of course there's huge amounts of roles for that extend far beyond the last 200 years. For example, a job that could make sense is you could discover the luxury items, the resources that were used to make clothes, stuff like that. Or the first 2,000 years prior to modern times. I mean, there's plenty of roles. I'm not gonna list them all. So, this book comes from a laboratory man. So as you can see, there's the publisher, there's the location, there's this time period listed, and there is the table of contents. So the table of contents indicate, for example, this is an experiment, and it is a sequence that must be followed. And an appendix is basically a resource list. So a lot of that is seen in the afterlife too, where there are a set of instructions, but there are also resources.